Welcome to The Bridge. We are a show that connects East and West. My name is Jason. I'm originally from sunny California and now living in beautiful Beijing. With me today is Bebe.
Hi, hello.
Today we have a special guest. Mario Cavallo, or Mr. Ma, is an influencer and American who's lived in China for 23 years, going on 24. Mr. Ma has a YouTube channel called Mr. Ma's Adventures. We recommend you check it out. He is an expert in communications, business, and a jazz pianist. He's also the founder of the Drago Quartz Audiophile Project, which highlights Chinese audio gear. He's also the author of 5 books, a senior fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. He's a featured media commentator for Huawei Global Thought Leadership Platform, CCTV, China Daily, The Global Times, The People's Daily, CGTN, Guangdong Today, and CRI Radio. Mario is a resident of China's northeast Liaoning province. Welcome to the show, Mario.
Hi, Mario.
Well, hi, baby. Hi, Jason. I want to tell you, when I just actually listened to Jason describing my life, and I realized how much it is the case that my life is right here in China. And, it's of course it's been exacerbated by the inability to travel with the way China's decided to handle the pandemic, right? So it's even been more so the case that for most all of us, we haven't been traveling. But I suddenly realized, I'm like, wow, my life is really Chinese. It's all this stuff going on here in China,
Yeah.
So and I'm happy about it. It's been crazy. It's been wonderful. It's been a blessing. It's had its tough moments, like everyone in life, right? But overall, wow, China's my home. And Jason, it is now officially 24 years this month.
24 years. 24 Congratulations.
Years. Wow. I was...
yeah, incredible. I can't even believe it.
So can I call you just Mr. Ma? Mr. Ma.
Okay,
yes?
Call me Mr. No, you have to, baby, you got to call me Ma Da Ge.
Oh, Ma Da Ge. Do you know what that means?
Big Brother Ma.
Big Brother Ma. So Big Brother is
Of
actually
course.
a very endearing
As you were,
title that you would give to someone who you are familiar with.
Well,
yeah.
It's also much better than if you want to call me Ma Shushu, because that makes me feel old.
No way.
And I don't want to feel old. But Mr. Ma's good. It's all good. The point is that as both of you know, I had gotten involved for very wonderful, positive reasons. I had gotten involved in the geopolitical landscape. I'm a media commentator regularly for CGTN, and I write these articles in China Daily and all the other major national media. Well, that's a wonderful thing that I'm working with all of them. But it was because of the geopolitical topics. Okay, and that topic is dark. I mean, it's dark. It can be negative in a lot of ways, and it can take a toll. Many people I know have said this, how it can take a toll on your emotions in your mind, because it's always, you're always discussing a problem. You're always discussing something negative. And I started saying to my friends and to my wife, but I'm in China, and well, I'm a jazz pianist, and I've played jazz piano in many of the Da Juyuan, the grand theaters all over China. And I'm like, well, that's a positive, which we can talk more about later. So that's a positive thing. And I have a beautiful Dongbei wife that I married, and a beautiful son, and a mother-in-law who doesn't speak and a mother-in-law who doesn't speak a wink of English. And then I'm discovering all these really wonderful things about my life in China. And obviously I wouldn't continue living here if I didn't feel that way, right?
Right.
So I'm like, I need a positive project. These are positive things. And these things are an adventure. And that's when it popped into my head. These things are an adventure. And then one of my friends, Yan, she's a UK Chinese, and she's in a lot of these things that we do. And she said, well, and you're Mr. Ma, Mario, Mr. Ma. And I'm like, yeah, so it's your adventures. And I went, yeah, it's Mr. Ma's China Adventures. And that was it. That was it. I was like, I need that. We need that because that's real life. Not that you're always stuck in dark, negative arguments about geopolitical problems and conflicts. We're worried about nuclear bombs tomorrow, right? No, daily life is daily, and we are. Daily life is what in China is still traditional family life. Right. We want to be able to say, do I live a life where I have the ability to pursue my life, liberty, and happiness? Do I have that in China? Do you have that in China?
Yeah, I do.
Do you? I live in Shenyang. I'm looking at 8 apartments. I'm looking out my big window right here, by the way, and there's the beautiful Aoti Stadium, the Shenyang Olympic Stadium, right across the road there. And there's the Wanda Mall and the Shinlong Mall, and there's people everywhere. And you go downstairs and it's Runao, right? It's real world, real life. People want to be able to do the best they can and have the best life that fate allows them to have, that they can best possibly have. And it's positive. It's positive. Right. Too much negative is bad for everybody.
And it's alive. It's a very lively country, I have to say. And also, speaking of traditional Chinese life, so you live in Liaoning province. You live in Shenyang. And
yes.
Do you still live?
4 years.
It's 4 years? And you live with your mother-in-law? Because that's like in the U.S., that would be like odd. Like people don't live with their.
There are some families. Some.
Oh, do you guys get along?
Yes, and I'm very happy to clarify that we do not live with our mother-in-law in the same house. We did that for a while. Okay, now listen, this is a great story because my wife. Okay, my wife is a Liaoning, Shenyang, Dongbei, Laopo.
Okay.
Okay. Now, whenever I tell people that I married a Dongbei Laopo, the Chinese people all look at me and they go, oh, they're like, so they know that a Dongbei Laopo is tough, and they have a very strong character, and it's this, and that's it, right? So, and it's true. She's tiny. She barely weighs 90 pounds, but no, man.
She's got things.
We know who's in charge. Yeah. So she's got it. Yes, she's got me. Right? So the point, so here's the point. Who does so my darling wife, and it's all wonderful. This is my darling wife. And we came to Shenyang 4 years ago knowing we eventually would have to come. Her mother's getting old, to be with her mom, take care of her mom. And also our boy is 11 now. He was 7 then. And, you got to get grandma and Ardza, Lao Lao and Ardza, together, right? Which is all a wonderful blessing. But now when it comes to things, though, that are happening in the family, right? Because it's a family. You're not married to the wife. You're married to a family. This is family life here in China, which I agree with. I'm Italian. I agree with that, right? It's traditional family. So who does my wife want to protect more? Her mother or me? Lucky guess? Not me. No way. Not me. Okay. So so we're having this thing where my mother-in-law was staying with us for like about a month or so. And we were thinking, we need to watch her, we need to take care of her, and she's in that bedroom over there on the other side of the house with her own bathroom. And I'm looking at my wife and I'm going, this isn't working. This isn't going to work, honey. And like, I want to get up in the morning and I want to be able to walk to the kitchen in my underwear, simple little things, and I can't because your mother's here, right? And I'm trying to explain this to her, but guess who was, but listen, she's arguing with me like crazy. She's like, you have to respect mom. And I'm like, of course, right? I know all that, but guess what she didn't want to understand? Guess who agreed with me?
Mother-in-law.
My mother-in-law, yeah, right. So I said to my wife, we got to have a talk about, Mom, we have to sit down with Mom, and we got to just talk about this like adults. And my wife was like, you're forbidden. Don't you say anything to my mother. And I knew, right, because she's protecting her mother, right? So I knew she was not seeing it. I knew she was, quote, wrong, and I mean that with love. Okay. And she went away. She went to work, right? And I said to myself, okay, I'm going to set me and my mother-in-law, because I have great respect for her. She's wonderful. We get along great. She drives me crazy, but I drive her crazy. That's all normal. And I said, okay, we're going to talk this out, and then I'll let my wife know later. So there's a rule you learn to follow in life. It's sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't have my wife's permission, right? So I sat down, I looked at my mother-in-law, and of course, this is all in Dongbei. This is all in Shar, Mama. 我爱你，你肯定知道我爱你。
That's so sweet.
我们一直在照顾你，对不对？And she said, yeah, I know. Right? Yeah. We're all good. So I'm like, Mom, my life is take care of you and Nana and our boy. I don't care about anything else. Okay. I said, but Ma, I think you don't want to stay here all the time either. And she said, oh, 烦了.
Annoying.
Yeah.
Right? 烦了. Yeah, it's so annoying. She's 我同意. She says, I agree. So me and her, we were beautiful. We were eye to eye. She's like, I don't want to stay here. I'm like, yeah, and I don't want you to stay here. Give me a hug,
I see.
We worked it out, right? And then we informed my wife. And she was like, okay.
Very smart.
Yeah. Family story.
Did you learn a thing or two?
Family story.
Well, I don't know if I want to try that strategy just yet, but I do want to ask you a little bit about where you're from and what brought you to China originally, because I've very rarely met someone who's lived in China as long as you have. I think, actually, you're the only person I know that has lived here this long who's not ethnically Chinese.
Yeah. I appreciate I really appreciate the question. 我觉得不可思议了. I also can't believe it. All right, because I'm telling you now that up until the time when I was invited to China, I previously had never had a thought about China in particular. So that's really quite incredible. So what happened? I had moved to in 1996. I had moved to Los Angeles. It was unfortunate, it was difficult. I was post-divorce, and those things are never pleasant. And then I moved to Los Angeles, actually Newport Beach, Orange County.
From New York?
In 96. No, from Phoenix. A lot of the Italian Americans, Jason, go to, there's a joke in New York. The Jews go to Miami, and the Italian Americans go to Phoenix.
Oh, yeah?
That's what goes on. Yeah, for the nice weather, to get out of the winter weather in the northeast of America. So my family has been in Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale for like 45 years. So we were all there. So like I said, then I had my reason to start my life fresh again, and I moved to Southern California. I moved to Newport Beach, and that was wonderful. And as you might know, when you Los Angeles, Newport Beach area, Orange County, you've got a lot more Asian Chinese. You got 1 million Chinese just up in San Gabriel. You've got 1 million Chinese in the middle of Los Angeles. Then you've also got down in Orange County, Laguna Hills, you've got a lot of Chinese, but also Korean, Vietnamese, and Japanese. So there's a lot more Asians. And so there, that was it. Just that they were in the community, wonderful. And I was going to an acupuncturist in Little Saigon, up in Garden Grove, up near Disneyland. You go into places, right? These little Chinese communities. Yeah, and right. The Vietnamese, but Vietnamese as well. In Garden Grove, it's called Little Saigon. And you go into a mall, and there's a mall, and all the streets, and there's no English anywhere. I mean, it's really like. It's all ethnic Asian. So it's Vietnamese and Chinese, they're all mixed in there. And I'm in there, and my neck is bad, so I'm getting some acupuncture done from the Chinese lady. And of course, I'm one of her few white guy customers, right? Most people in America have no clue. They would never go to I was the only white guy in the whole mall, right? Wow. And I would go in there and go shopping and go to the Chinese medicine shops. But I was there for the acupuncture. Okay, so that was my only connection to China and Asia was my Chinese acupuncture lady. And she just one day said to me, my friend is from Chongqing. And I was like, where's that? And she said, oh, it's in Sichuan. It's in, it's in the hinterland, right? We know this word. It's in the hinterland. It's in Sichuan province, which is the middle of the country. And I went, that's nice. And she says, he will invite you to go to China. He'll invite you to go to China to do some business. And I thought, okay, sure, I'm interested. I was free.
Yeah.
I swear to you, that's what happened. So he takes me, this Chongqing guy, wonderful, Frank, I love you. I do the shows. I always mention him. His English name is Frank Lee. He's back in LA with the family restaurant. He brings me to Chongqing. I meet his family, of course. I don't have to tell you, this was 3 years later, so this was 1999. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine I arrived in Chongqing and Chengdu in 1999? It was before WTO. Nothing, zero had changed. Nothing changed. So this blew my mind. This blew my mind. But also when you show up in Chongqing and get your culture shock from Chongqing, in 1999, and Chengdu as well. We were in Chengdu, going to Chengdu too, because the U.S. consulate was in Chengdu. Okay, but it's not only you getting the culture shock. I'm the only tall, white guy in the city, basically. And so all the Chongqing people, they're the ones, because they're, by the way, people out in Sichuan are short.
Right, shorter.
So I'm 188. I'm 188 tall. So I'm 188. So I'm extra tall. Now, I would go walking along the streets and people are, they're staring at you, and with their kids and everything. This is 24 years ago. Right. So I go into a shirt and tie shop along the road, all the shops together, right? And the merchant economy of China, which I still love. And I go into the shop and I'm looking at shirts and ties and I'm in there for like 10, and I turn around and at the entrance to the shop, the entire neighborhood stopped what they were doing to come over, and I was like the show. I was the show, and they came over to see, and I turned around, and there they were, and I was like, oh my God. And they were with their I don't have a doll with me, with their babies,
Right.
Ni hao, hello, and I'm laughing. I was laughing. This is 1999.
Wow,
right?
That's an amazing
and
story.
The curiosity is amazing, right? It's incredible, but it points out a lot of things, doesn't it? Because I don't want to, Jason, I said this to you earlier in the week. I don't want to talk about me to talk about me. That's absolutely not necessary. I want to talk about me in these stories because of what it tells us about the country, about cross-cultural relations, about life. That's what's important. And when you look at what was happening back then, why people, Chinese people are high on what's called curiosity in their minds. Chinese people are high on curiosity, and they're not afraid to ask questions because and again, there's a subtlety here. The reason Chinese people ask you questions is because they're looking for a friendly conversation, but they're looking for what it is that they can compliment you on. It's a strategy, okay? So what they want to do is that when a Chinese person meets you, in order to develop rapport, to have a friendly conversation, like in a taxi, okay? The taxi driver wants to have a friendly conversation with you, okay? So in order to have a friendly conversation with you, they want to say they want to say that they admire you. They can't say, oh, Nisha Hanhao, wow, you are great, what's wonderful. Where are you from? Meiguo. Wow, that's wonderful, you are from Meiguo. Really? Do you own a home in China? What? What? It's just like, what? I mean, no one in America would ever ask a stranger, do you own a home? It would never enter your mind to ever ask a question like that.
You guys
would never. Jason, do you understand me?
Yeah, but you already started talking. You're no longer strangers. No longer complete strangers.
Now.
Right. So it's do you own a home? Answer. Let's just say my answer is yes, and it was yes, because my first home I bought was on the beach in Sanya, Hainan Island, in 2002. Can you imagine that? So that's another story, right? So I said yes. because it was true. And then the taxi driver said, and how big is it? And what did you pay for it? And you're just like, oh my God. The foreigner is going, no, you got to be kidding me. And then you must know. Why? Hun, how? How big is your apartment? Oh, it's 110 square meters. Oh, that's good for you. Good for you. Yeah. How much money do you make? And now the foreigner is out of his mind. The foreigner cannot believe that this stranger would ask these imposing, rude, inappropriate questions. And what is it that the taxi driver, he wants to have a friendly conversation. Yeah. Wow, you're from another country? Well, you're from America? You own a home here? It's 110 square meters? Good for you. Can you see the ocean? You make how much money? Wow, that's so great.
Yeah. And also,
now it makes sense. Right. That's what he...
Yeah.
Wait, so I guess it's a way of, as you said, getting to know each other. And because you come all the way from the United States to China, and especially back then, I think people would naturally assume that there must be a good reason why you were there. You know, you are already a friend.
Yes.
A friend from afar. And then they will chat with you as if you're, a friend. Are you married? How many kids?
Yes.
What job do you do? All these so-called personal questions. But I think you get used to it after a while. Do you, Jason?
I mean, I've completely adapted. I don't actually. I'm not sure if I would be able to have a normal conversation in America anymore because I'm not sure what's off the table anymore.
Yeah, different.
Yeah, it's difficult. It is difficult. I know one thing, Jason. Jason, how long have you been here? Remind me again.
Just over 10 years.
Okay, so you're good for you. Hit the 10. 10's the first big magic. Well, 5's the first magic number. 10's the second big magic number. Good for you.
So,
good for you,
Mr. Ma. So you came to China back in 1999. That was early. How did you decide to stay? Like, were you here just for a job or for a visit?
Right. I came with my friend Frank. He wanted. We were making an effort because there were back then. Mostly in Chongqing and Chengdu, because the U.S. consulate was there. So there were some guys back then in Chengdu, businessmen who had a lot of money, and they wanted to meet business people in America to try and do business and do joint ventures. And we were serving to introduce them to each other, like the Chamber of Commerce does, right? So that was the purpose of our trips, and that's terrific, right? So that was the purpose. But I didn't have a pleasant. I had a wonderful job, a wonderful new career start in it just happened to be timing, in Newport Beach. I was, for 3 years, I had a new job position. The offices of the company I was working for was right on Newport Harbor. So outside my office window was the yachts on Newport Harbor. So it was a wonderful life. But that company literally just happened to go out of business after 3 years. So I was in between projects. I've always been an independent person. As an entrepreneur, I've always been a professional speaker, a trainer. I'm always in front of people. Okay, so it's very comfortable for me. I teach camera skills, all this stuff. So I've always been in media and communications. So I happen to be not tied to a specific contract at that time when I got invited to China. So I didn't have much to go back home to. It was like, okay, wait a minute. Because I arrived in China, and then there was a small chamber of commerce, and then I'll tell you what happened. Two key things happened. I came and we mostly spent our time in Chengdu, again, because of the U.S. consulate. Back then, it was easy as a citizen to get in. You could walk in the front door of the U.S. consulate. Because back then it wasn't a bit as formal as it is now. And for example, the consul general's brother was a priest, and he was visiting, and he was staying at the consulate, and he was studying Chinese medicine at Huaxida, which is the famous Chinese medicine TCM University on Renminlu in downtown Chengdu, a couple of kilometers from the consulate. So here was his brother, the priest, who was studying TCM at the university. Amazing, right? And then his brother on Sundays would do mass. I'm Italian Catholic. His brother on Sundays would do mass at the consulate. So we had our little community of maybe 10 people. So we'd meet at the consulate. So now I was getting involved in the community. I was starting to develop a life. And then the consulate, then the second thing that happened was Motorola grabbed me and asked me to start doing business communications training for them. Motorola was the one back then, remember? Back then, the foreign world was Motorola, Siemens, and Volkswagen. That was like, they were the top of the world here in China, those three companies. And funny how things change, right? So I started doing work for Motorola. They sent me to Beijing, which was my first trip to Beijing for some training. I couldn't believe I was hooked, right? I went to Beijing.
What
I was
about
like,
Beijing?
wow. And then and then back to Chengdu. And then the third thing that happened is we left, we came back. We left, we came back. So we had like 3 trips over the course of maybe 3 months apart. So 我来来去去3次. I came back 3 times. So then the consulate finally had an important big project which they invited me to participate in. And that was that China was entering the WTO, and then the United States, the Chengdu consulate with the Chengdu Foreign Affairs Office and Sichuan MAFTEC and the Chongqing Overseas Affairs Office all together organized a series of WTO seminars all over the province for business people in China to explaining to them what it meant that China was entering the WTO. And they asked me to be one of the businessmen speakers during that conference. And so things just started adding up. And then, okay, so you tell me, you come knocking on my hotel, baby, let's say it's you, because it was my friend, Mr. Lee, my friend Frank, the Chongqing guy, comes knocking on my door. Mario, yeah? Pack your bag. Tomorrow we're going back to Guangzhou. And I looked at him and I went, nope, you're going back to Guangzhou. I'm staying here. And he went, you are? I go, yep, I rented an apartment. And that was it. That was it.
Nice.
Just like that. Within the first year, I was like, it's better to stay than to go back.
All these
and that was the bottom line.
And also, you were talking about your Catholic religious background. And I actually want to ask you about that because I was reading your book. One of your books about China, and in one of the sections you talked about you going to the church in China. I don't remember where exactly. I think in Shanghai with your wife.
Yes, Sacred Heart in Pudong.
Because I think maybe
right.
in Western, I don't know, in a lot of other Western countries,
there may be misconceptions.
Yeah, there's a misunderstanding. They think that we
Really?
are not, we are completely not religious, or you can't hold religious activities and things like that. So there's a huge misunderstanding. I mean, at my workplace, I remember I had, at least in my small office, we had 2 very devout Christians. And of course, I have Buddhist friends. And I know quite some people who are very religious, and they attend Mass on Sundays. Actually, I went to one. Yes. This was like maybe, I don't know, at least 15 years ago. For one Christmas, someday before that, I actually decided I went with my coworker and to like a Sunday Mass. This was in Haidian somewhere in Beijing. Yeah. And it was so crowded. Yeah. I literally had to squeeze in between the seats. And I think like half an hour into it, I almost...
Baby, I really like this topic because for positive reasons, but also a negative thing, which I don't want to spend too much time on. It's very, very upsetting when people lie and cheat and it hurts other people. To me, it happened to me specifically in my life in a couple of different things that... So I'm really sensitive about this. And so one of the things that happens is, and it's so upsetting because I've been here 20 and cheat and it hurts other people. To me, it happened to me specifically in my life in a couple of different things that, so I'm really sensitive about this. And so one of the things that happens is, and it's so upsetting because I've been here 24 years, when you know something someone says is completely untrue, and not only that, but it's a really mean, nasty thing. Right, and this is about this is about religion and the church in China. If you go to the United States State Department website, there's an official notice, and Pompeo did it, and Blinken's doing it now. It's an official notice that says China continues to violently oppress people practicing all faiths and religions.
No way.
And I read that. And it's on the official U.S. State Department website. Now let that end the political conversation. I don't want to talk about it because I hate it. But can you imagine that? No. What's the reality? In Shanghai, of course, it's one of the more international cities here. And in Shanghai, you've got several Christian churches, several Catholic churches. As you mentioned when you were speaking, one of the Christian churches that I went to, and it's like 2,000 people. That's huge. And and I went there and it was packed, right? I believe at this point that China is more Judeo-Christian than the United States or Europe is anymore. Right? I'm to that, right? It's okay, and you say, I want to talk about two things on this. There's Judeo-Christianity as a base of ethics, not religion. And then there's Confucianism as the base, as the principles of ethics as well. Now, we know that primarily it's China. In China, it's primarily the Confucian principles, six, I believe, the principles of Confucianism that drive people values in terms of develop your virtue, be a good person, but also filial piety, respect your, that's it, the filial piety. And that's what I want to mention, because the filial piety means family is the most important thing. And the original Judeo-Christian ethic, which began where? In Italy, right? Rome, the Vatican, Rome, the center of the church was Rome. We're going back 2,000 years, right? At the birth of Christ. All right. So this is a very similar set of ethics, which says that the marriage and family traditional society is the best, strongest root of society and needs to be. And the moment you start getting away from that, which they did in Europe and they did in the US, into this new neoliberal ideology, society will start to decline. Now, that was the theory. But it's no longer a theory because we've seen it. It's happened, right? We see it happening. Okay, the degree to which the United States society pushing away from marriage, family, church, etc., to keep as the glue of the society. As soon as they did start pushing away from that, the society has had all kinds of problems in deteriorating and declining, but then. Skipping that as well, but then they're saying, but China's an atheist country.
That's a tricky question. We can talk about that, yeah.
Right, and yeah, it's China's an atheist. Well, the government is atheist. Well, the United States government is atheist too. So they call it separation of church and state. That's the very definition of it, and that's fine. In other words, if we're having a business discussion, let's say, oh, baby, Jason, I got a business project, and I got this idea, and we're going to sell, these widgets. I think we could sell them for $10 a piece, and I think we could make a 70% profit, and let's make a business plan and discuss it. And then if any of us says, well, what religion are you? Or, well, let's pray about it. That's not business. That doesn't make sense, right? It's, wait a minute, we're discussing business. So separation of church, separation of spiritual and state, right?
You can pray.
Fine, okay. Yeah. So China does that. America does that. All the governments do that. Now we know though in the Middle East, for example, like Islam, they don't do that, right? The Islam is a way of life. It's a way of decision making. That is religion is part of your decision making. Right? So you can separate those two out, but that doesn't mean, as we're discussing, as you noted, that religions aren't flourishing in China and that people are not allowed to practice. This is ridiculous. When our son was, I want to say last thing real quick, when our son was born, we went to the Catholic Church, one of the Catholic churches in Shanghai happened to be Sacred Heart in Pudong, where we were living. And we went to speak to Father Joe. We were discussing with Father Joe whether or not to have our child baptized at the church here in Shanghai, or whether we were going to take him back to America to do it with Grandma and Grandpa back in Arizona. We chose to do it back in Arizona. But the point is, It was no big deal. It was, baptisms and marriages and all the church activities that you do here in China, the same as same as anywhere outside of China. That's the point. And they try and tell you that's not true, and that really angers me. That makes me very angry.
Now, I have two interesting things I want to share and also discuss with you guys. Now, one of the things, see if you guys can agree with me. Let's say if someone comes from, let's say, the U.S. to China to do a survey on religion. And it depends on the result you're going to get, depends on how you ask the questions, right? If you go on the street and just start asking people, are you religious? I think you might get a lot of no's, because I think Chinese people's understanding of the term religious has its specific structure. Now, if you ask them, do you have a faith, or do you believe in the existence of God, or do you believe in the Buddha? I think you'll get different answers. When you ask, say, a Chinese person, are you religious? They will think.
If I could comment on that, actually.
Just 1 second. They will think that you're asking them if they go to the church, if they believe, if they, participate in Bible group study. That there's very, more rigid understanding of definition of religious. But if you ask them, do you think the Buddha exists, or do you think God exists? They a lot more will say, I believe so. And then if you ask them, similar question, but on the flip side, do you not believe, or do you think that there is no God, or do you think there is no Buddha in this world? I think you'll get a higher percentage of people saying, well, I think, it's harder to deny them.
And that's called... Right. Yeah. No, if you don't believe in God at all, that's atheist. Right. If you say, I'm not sure, I don't know, that's called agnostic. The word is agnostic. Jason, what were you going to say?
Sorry.
Well, actually, the way that I was looking at some of the statistics about Taoism and how they tabulate who a Taoist is. And according to Taoism, the really hardcore system is you actually have to be a practicing Taoist monk or priest to be counted as a Taoist. But we all know from living in China that there are tens of millions, if not more, people who are practitioners of Taoism, who go to Taoist temples, who pray before various Taoist gods. So the way that it's tabulated and in a lot of data and graphs in the West is an inaccurate representation of what life in China is actually like.
That's a really good point, because let's say there are a lot of people who practice Buddhism here in China, but you don't maybe some get a certificate, like you go to a temple and they'll give you some kind of I don't know actually.
Well, yeah, my wife actually has one of those.
Yeah, I guess that's for people who are seriously practicing, learning about this religion. But for a lot of people,
my mother-in-law,
she has one. Okay, but for me, I study. I try to study Buddhism, and I read my scriptures morning and night, but I don't have a badge or a certificate. So if you ask me, are you a Buddhist? I'm like, I'll be like, I don't know if I count as a Buddhist. Or if you ask, are you a Taoist? I mean, I might be studying or practicing certain Taoist practices, but I don't have a badge or title. So it depends on how you do the survey. Yeah.
Yes, baby. And what I want to do is I want to say this word. I want to throw the word in for you here, which is to say spiritual practices.
Yes,
so it's the difference between are you specifically engaged into and committed into a specific religion? The answer might be no, I'm not. However, I am spiritual, or I have spiritual practices, or I accept that I believe in the spiritual or you can call it spiritual or divine nature of life. And so I'm saying I believe in God. I'm a bit general about it. By the way, I'm not a good Catholic.
Okay, I'm not going to ask the details.
I don't go to church. I don't go to. Yeah, right. I don't go to church. I don't regularly practice the full Catholic faith, but I don't throw it out the window and reject it either. Right. So I accept the idea of the spiritual and the divine principles. Fine. But it's like this, what you're saying, though. So do I say, oh, I'm Catholic?
Right.
Well, I don't practice my Catholicism that much, actually, but I guess I'm still Catholic. Yes. I'm just not a good one. I mean, you don't need to have these conversations with people. It can get. There's a lot of muddy water here.
And how do you define religious freedom? I can sit here and think about
Yeah.
God.
Well, okay. Now, baby. Now the thing is, baby, that what you and we're saying. So, what is the degree to which people in China are practicing their religions, and they're certainly allowed to? That this is a rational adult discussion. So when the United States government comes along and says, "Oh no, not only are people not practicing religion in China, but China is evil," the government is still to this day violently oppressing people practicing faiths of all faiths and religions. When you read that, they're not just, it's the same thing. It's the same thing with the Uyghurs. They're genociding the Uyghurs. This is ugly, sick stuff. And it makes me, and it's very difficult for me because I'm an American. I'm not anti-American when I say it, but when I see something that's so morally gross and incorrect, and then they use it, they politicize it to demonize China. When in fact the reality is, and whenever I do an interview, I say this, when in fact the reality is this: China is now the largest safe, stable, successful, capable, peaceful, and civil country on the planet. I always say that during my interviews. And that's a mouthful, and it's the truth. Okay? Do you realize, going back to the positive things, which is that China has just blossomed incredibly over these 30 years, especially 20 years. But let's go back and remember that it actually, if we go back to the last time China was involved in a war, not started a war, and that was Vietnam, and that was the mid-1970s. So it has been China's rise to super world power with so much influence, and that's a whole nother discussion, has been peaceful for almost half a century. China hasn't started a war or attacked any other country in almost half a century. And then I have to listen to these damn US politicians say China is a threat. China is evil. The country that hasn't started a war or attacked any other country in a half a century is the evil threat? No, you're the evil threat. And then they just project this out onto China. It's just disgusting.
I know, and I think people, a lot of people don't appreciate, especially people outside China, don't appreciate how cool-headed the central leadership has been in China. I mean, a lot of times the people are actually, when you say things like that to the Chinese people, first of all, we are shocked. We are a threat to whom? Because
we're evil? We're a threat? That's right.
To what? I'm just living my life.
What are they talking about?
I know, and they tell us, you guys are oppressed. I'm like, huh? Really?
The government. I am? Really? Right, here. Thank you. I'm like, you're oppressed? What?
What do you mean? Right,
this is exactly it.
After a lot of that, some people will get angry. Some people, we don't like people telling us this, but we appreciate the fact that the central leadership, of the country, they don't get, how do you say, shifted, or they're not as... They don't become what's called hawkish, which means they don't threaten war.
I'm not sure what that means.
Hawkish.
They don't react. They're not reactionary to propaganda.
Yes.
Like they don't
take the bait.
Exactly. They have the
amazing self-control.
Yeah, the composure, and just so poised and cool-headed. Because if I make the call, or if some other groups of more people with more feverish temperatures or more feverish temperament make the choices, maybe bad things would have happened, right? But thinking back, I really appreciate how cool and composed the central leadership has been. So.
I want to, you do a lot
but don't push us too far.
You do a lot of media commentary, right? So I was wondering if you could, because there are a lot of different perceptions in our country, in America, about China, and I was wondering if you could comment on the how you see China represented in America to Americans versus life in China? What's it actually like?
Yeah, and that difference is, as we're already indicating by what we're saying.
Even in the field of China experts, people who claim to be experts, but then is their expertise representative of what life is like in China?
No, there's really not. And this is the problem. I read things written by very intelligent, even well-intended people. They're not necessarily anti-China. And I read what they write about China, and I just go, I'm just like, they don't know. And they write it because they're intellectual. You are under the impression they have credibility. So you would think, this is a credible guy, and they're writing this paper, and they're an intellectual and smart person, and they have 2 MBAs, and they're in this position and that, but you read it, and so you think, yeah, but Jason, it's just completely off. It's so wrong. Whatever it is they're writing, their perception, their idea of, and they've done this with the 20th Congress last week, their perception and the way that they're writing about it has nothing to do with the reality of what you watched for 5 days, watching it yourself. Go, excuse me? What? President Xi's... I'm happy to inform you that President...
I couldn't believe that was an article.
President...
This was on CNN, where they're analyzing how much tea Xi Jinping is drinking instead of the content of his speech.
What? That's odd.
Yes.
Do you know that I did a live podcast with Alex over at iChongqing, which is another great news outlet, and I did a live podcast during Xi's speech with him. We were live during Xi's speech live. And so we made an effort to listen to what she was saying. And the phrase I used was, Xi's speech is wonderfully boring. He didn't say, which of course I don't mean it's boring. I'm meaning to say, he didn't say anything that surprised me. And that's good. That's a good thing, right? Everything that he said was a reflection of Xi and the government's understanding of what? Where China has been, where China is now, and where China is going in the future. And he just laid it out. It was a pragmatic, clear, there was nothing overly flowery about it. It bordered on boring, and that's good, right? Yeah. It was repetitive, and that's a good thing, right? That was very good. So that's it. He just was like,
right. Yeah.
Also, by the way, very highly self-reflective and self-critical. We have problems. We still have these problems. We are still committed to and are more than ever addressing these problems. Now, I don't know about you guys, but what more do you want from your government than that? I can't think of anything.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that their job? I mean, isn't that what that's what they're supposed to do? And then you get the Western reading of what she said. Oh my God. And you read and you go, what? The CNN headline was, Xi's speech focused. This was the CNN headline immediately after Xi's speech. I screenshotted it and wrote an article about it because I was like, what? Xi's speech focuses on Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the pandemic. That was the headline on CNN immediately after Xi's speech. I was like refreshing the page going, what speech did they listen to? Because my response was, okay, it was well over an hour. At the time, I thought it was maybe about an hour, but it seems like the speech was even close to 2 hours. In the period of over close to 2 hours, call it an hour and a half. In the period of a whole 90-minute speech, he didn't say more than 5 sentences about Hong Kong. He said what he said about Hong Kong was like 5 sentences. What he said about Hong Kong was like 5 sentences. And what he said about the pandemic was, I think, even only like 4 sentences or 3 sentences. He didn't say anything hardly at all about them. He said, we will reunify with Taiwan. This is why nothing's changed. And then he went on to the next subject. That's all he said about Taiwan. Yeah. Same thing with the pandemic. We have succeeded at protecting people's health. We will continue adjusting zero COVID to do our best to protect people's health while not impacting the economy. That's all he said. And he went on to the next subject. So out of 90 minutes, that's all the man said. Right? And then CNN says, he focused on those topics for 90 minutes. No.
That's so odd.
He focused on, it's so odd. It's so weird. But that's what Western media does. They distort China. They distort China. And then they open the top of the American people's heads and they pour the crap in. That's what they do.
Oh, wow. So I actually want to talk a little bit about patriotism. I was there's a section in your book about patriotism, and how maybe Americans' way of being patriotic and also Chinese way of patriotic, and that got me thinking, because I never really thought about, I know I'm patriotic, but never thought about how I have been patriotic. And I think I feel like for a lot of Chinese people, being patriotic is about having this tacit understanding of what your country has been doing, where it wants to go, and how it wants to go about it, how it wants to go about reaching that goal. So the top and the bottom, us being at the bottom, the common people, we have a common understanding of our goals and how we're going to do it. And that makes a lot of...
We're the people. It's the People's Republic. We're at the top.
Well, in a way, because it's mutual, right? We, let's say after these major meetings, we get a sense of the 5-year plans. Okay, I get, now we have to protect the environment more. And now, we work together to tackle the pandemic. And we don't need a lot of heated discussion. Okay, we agree upon this. And a lot of I think a lot of the one important way for a lot of the Chinese people to be patriotic is to know that, we don't want to make things more complicated. It's hard enough governing this country, this huge area with all these people. We know that it's hard enough. Let's not make unnecessary, complications. I think that's one of the major ways of how a lot of Chinese people being patriotic. Is that how you guys be patriotic? I don't know. Did what I say make sense to you? Yeah?
I'll only say it makes sense to me in terms of what even Western surveys and research have confirmed, which is to say, we all understand that Chinese people on a daily basis don't think about nor want to think about politics or their government. And that's a good thing, because I believe that they intentionally, in the West, Jason, I believe that they're intentionally riling up everyone and telling them to get themselves involved in politics and speak and go protest as a means of distracting them and wasting all of their time, because it doesn't make any impact at all. The plutocracy is in control. They don't do anything that the people want. They do everything that they want to serve the plutocracy. And they're giving all these people, you have your free speech, yes, go protest, just to keep them busy.
Right.
Just to keep them busy, not to make any impact, because they make very little impact. But here in China, they don't play that game, which is good. They don't try to fool the people. In China, the government does its best to do its job. Exactly. And let me tell you something. If a government doesn't do a good job, then everybody's in trouble. And if the government does do a good job, then everybody's okay. And the Chinese people, like you just said, they're like, wow, that's complicated stuff. I don't want to get involved in that. I just hope that whatever the government does enables me to be able to have my decent life that I want to have.
And also,
that's all they care about.
Exactly. I want to add to that, because, after I like to read about these, and especially, books written by Western scholars about China, the Chinese governance in general. And time after time, and also with my personal experience of living here, time after time, I found out that, I can worry about things happening, but the government always have a better way. Always has a better strategy. They know so much more about what's happening and how to tackle all the problems. So after a while, I feel like I don't need to worry that much.
Don't need to, right? There's no. What do you have to say about it?
I know,
right.
You've got the professionals doing their job diligently. All we hope is that they don't work too hard.
Hopefully they are.
So, yeah, I think, we have that much faith. Because, I don't want to call it faith. I think it's just the understanding of reality. They're doing what they can. It's a tough job. And let's not make things more complicated.
That's their job.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's in professional hands.
Jason, That's right. Right. The Chinese person, I feel, is like, that's their job. My job's my job. That's their job. I hope they're doing a good job. And actually, as we know, China has, along with Singapore, the number one and or number two, very close every year, most trusted government and most satisfied citizens in the world. On that happy note, Edelman and Harvard study as well. And on that happy note, let's move on to the non-political and non-governmental topics. I want to tell you the coolest thing that I did in China, because it caused me to see local China. And that was when, because I wrote my article, I was thrust into the public media in China. The article I wrote in February 2020, Something's Not Right Here, Folks, which was defending China, to say that to blame China for the pandemic is ridiculous. I wrote that article. We don't have time to talk about it right now. That article went crazy, viral across the whole world and all across China. People's Daily, Huanqiu Wang translated it into Chinese. It remained at the top of the page in China for 10 days. That made me famous. So next thing I know, I'm invited to work in public media. So now I work with all, as Jason mentioned earlier, I work with all the public media. So now getting to the best part of it all was when, CGTN asked me to doing some culture and society documentaries, to shoot culture and society documentaries. And then the last one that I did so far, this is so far, CCTV also asked me to do one, which was for the international audience. So the CGTN documentaries, enough talking about all the government and political things. I'm glad to say the Chinese government is doing a really good job running the country. What they've done over the last 20 years and longer is amazing. And the results are clear for everyone to see. Now, if people in the West want to deny it, that's their problem. We move on to more important and happier things. Because as I was saying, because I got involved with the media, so then the best thing that happened, I think, over this last 3 years was getting invited to be the host of shooting documentaries, being the 主持,纪录片主持, right? So it started with CGTN, who asked me to start shooting poverty alleviation documentaries. And so first I went to Wuzhou in Guangxi, to the Liubao tea village. So there I am in the countryside they sent me out into the countryside up in the tea farms, in the tea hills down in Guangxi province. I was with the ladies picking tea, picking the tea with the big baskets of tea. And I was like, wow. And they're paying me to do this, right? Do you know what I'm saying? I was working. Right. So then I would be there, I'm in the fields with the ladies picking tea, or I'm with the guy and the lady in the factory, and she's showing me how they roll the tea. They have the tea. They roll the tea and then they dry it and then they roll. So the old cooking it and rolling it, yes. And this whole process. And the old lady, she's like 80 years old, and she's showing me, and they're filming me. So then I'm doing this. I'm having fun with the lady rolling the tea, and then I turn and look at the camera and tell everybody what I'm doing. And I thought, gosh, this is so much fun, right? And this was work. I mean, this was sharing with the world. And if anything does what, Jason, you said to me yesterday, hopefully what we can do is win over some hearts and minds, right? I mean, that's what we want to do. This is the real world. This is real life. So we did that. And then the second place I went was in the middle of Sichuan, in the middle of nowhere, like an hour and a half from Chengdu, a place called Deyang. And there was a guy with his family in the village. They were never going to get to the ocean. His parents were really old. So this guy brought the ocean to them. He made money. He invested and built a giant water park there in the middle of Sichuan. That's what he did. And the point is that along the way of doing that, he created an economy. He created jobs. He worked with the local government there. And this is what poverty alleviation in China is all about. There's local businessmen who have money. They cooperate together with the local. It's always at the municipal level. These are the projects that are happening at the municipal level with the support of Beijing to raise up the local lifestyles and income levels of the local people. And that's what Fupin is. Poverty alleviation, right? Then the third place I went wasn't, well, it was accidental poverty alleviation. But it was more about history, which was the Tanmen fishing village on Hainan Island, just north of Boao, and on the coast near Chonghai, on Hainan's east coast. That is actually a better place to go on holiday than Sanya. Don't tell the Sanya Tourist Bureau. Don't tell the Sanya Tourist Bureau I said that, right? That area is quieter. It's more wild and rustic now. Where I gotta say, Sanya's it's really commercially developed now. A lot it's like Cancun, you know? And, you know, I mean, look, if you're gonna stay on a 5-star hotel at the beach, it doesn't matter. You're having a good time anyway. But if you want to go to where it's more rustic and less developed, then go to the Tanmen fishing village and Chonghai and Boao area. Well, the thing is, this is China's oldest harbor, going back over 1,000 years. Wow, what history I learned. And we were filming along the fishing along the harbor, and with the old junks, they're called junks, the old wooden fishing boats going in and out of the harbor. What an experience to do these kinds of things. So because I wanted to, it's right along the lines of Mr. Ma's China Adventures, right? This is the real history and culture of China. And then CCTV called me. So this was like, these are the big kahunas. I don't have to tell you, right? CCTV Direct, they called me. And they said, we're doing an international documentary. 6 episodes, 30 minutes each. And we want you to host 2 of the episodes. I said, okay. I'm like, wow, great. So now listen to the time. In order to fulfill the production of a 30-minute show and to host a 30-minute show, 2 of them, that's a total of 1 hour, right? How much time do you need to spend on the road with the CCTV film crew to end up with 1 hour of documentary? Answer, 30 days on the road with the film crew. Unbelievable. They said, you're going to meet the film crew in Lanzhou. You're going to do the last part of the journey. The story is called Red Star Rising, based on Edward Snow's book, Red Star Rising. And you're going to do you're going to retrace the path of the Long March.
Wow.
From Sichuan to Yan'an. And you're doing the last third of it from Gansu province down around Dingbian and up to Yan'an, the revolutionary base where Mao went to rescue his colleague, I forget his name, Li Degong, I can't remember. He went to rescue the colleague he heard was trapped there, and met up with the Soviet revolutionaries in Yan'an, and that's where it ended. And then a few years later, as we all know, the country they kept building from there, and then ultimately in 1949 they declared China the People's Republic of China. So I got to trace Mao and the 3rd and the 8th Army's journey of the Long March, and talk about it during these documentaries. What an amazing experience for me. I'm like, wow, right? And I'm on the road with and I got my boy. My boy is like 9 years, and I'm on the road with him in WeChat, and I'm doing the video WeChat with him all day long, and I'm showing him where I am and all this stuff I'm doing. what an amazing, wonderful experience. So, like every country, China has this history and the long marches talking about patriotism, something everyone in the country needs to understand and should be proud of.
Right.
Every country has these experiences. The United States had its Civil War, Europe had many of their own wars, etc.
Wow, you've been busy for the past 24 years. All these interesting experiences.
Yeah.
Work opportunity.
One of the things that surprised me is you were an actor in a Chinese movie. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Playing General MacArthur?
Yeah, that was really special. I will tell you, back in the early 2000s, I did a lot of TV series as well. Look, I'm a speaker. I'm very comfortable on the camera, so it was a natural thing. They asked me to start doing acting. So I did a lot of Dianziju. I did Yao Bai Nilong with Zheng Zhiwei. So back then, I worked with Zheng Zhiwei and Ye Tong, who were back then even Zheng Zhiwei, even now, is quite famous. You know, the short, stocky guy, the Hong Kong actor.
I think I know
Zheng Zhiwei.
I think I know who you're talking about.
But that was in the early 2000s, and I did quite a few. I did also, I can't remember, with the lady with the boss. I'll remember it later. Doesn't matter, because it was just work. It was just work. I didn't become famous. Fine. So it was just work. Doolala R. Doolala.
I've heard of
I
that.
did Doolala
It was popular,
R. I was I was her boss. Okay, again, doesn't matter. So I got asked to do some production work. Okay, that's fine. But when I got asked to play General MacArthur in Crossing the Yalu River, that was a big deal. Because it was the anniversary of the China in the Korean War. So it was the anniversary of China pushing back on the U.S. aggression on the Korean Peninsula, and they were making this big war movie about it. And it was at the end of the year, and it had to do with the anniversary. And so it was the first TV series that I was ever in where I happened to get a lead role, where I played MacArthur. This was obviously the lead role. So it was the first one where I ever got to play the lead role, but it was also CCTV1 prime time.
Wow. Nice.
So that's why it was a big deal. So then when it went on the air, boom. So that was great. So that was an amazing experience, and I appreciated it. I don't do that kind of work that often, but there was that one, and that was really fun and really cool. And again, it showed me more and gave me more of an understanding of China's history as a country and what its people and its government care about, So over these years, I got to really understand this country much, much better.
I think one of probably the most difficult thing for foreigners, people outside China, to learn about China is that there's so much to know. And you need to really spend some time to soak in the culture, because Chinese people, it takes time for people to get to know each other and for people to get a sense of the lifestyle. And so I think, you were talking about how a lot of Westerns, even scholars, when I read a lot of the works they write, I feel like, they know something about China, but not really at a certain depth. Like they haven't spent enough time. It takes literally decades to really get to know this place, to get to know the people. And if you've seen the numbers or you've seen the graphs, you've interviewed a few people, that give you a picture on the surface.
Can I comment on this?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
This is something that frustrates me actually a lot personally, because I see a lot of China experts who have like a PhD in China studies from Cambridge, and maybe they've been to China for like a few months here and there, and that's it. And then they go back and they represent China to an entire other nation, and people think of them as an expert. And sure, I'm sure they're very smart people, but after I'd lived here 5 years, I still had no idea like the depth and complexity. And the more I've learned about China, the more I realize I don't know very much about China, even after 10 years. So for these people to study China from afar with a university degree from a Western country and then speak on behalf of China about what is happening here, I think is kind of a ludicrous proposition.
And from your book,
Yep.
I remember there's a section about thinking like a Chinese, and you wrote that
Yes.
if you can't think like a Chinese, you can't really understand China or anything about China. And as a Chinese, I
That's
agree
right.
with that, and I know that it takes a lot of time.
Yes.
Not that you have to learn or study a lot, but just being here, getting to know the people and, associate with them. That's how you learn about this culture and how you start to understand the people in the country. And if you don't have that experience, it's very hard to have a valid opinion or a judgment. But I think the sad thing is, a lot of people don't have that experience, but they have a lot of opinions. And that's when we have, trouble.
Yeah,
sometimes.
I get real. Yeah, that's right. And this is Jason's frustration that I share with him, because I listen to foreigners who have been here for 4 years or 7 years, and then they start talking, and they start talking like they know exactly what they're talking about, and then I'm just sitting there, I'm just nodding my head, going, "You have no idea what you think you know what you're talking about, but you don't." And this is the problem, right? When you know enough to be dangerous, right? And that is the problem. And it wouldn't matter, but the stakes are high. The stakes are high. Geopolitically, we have a lot of conflict happening now. So the stakes are high. What's going to happen in the future? And so it matters if people are spouting information that's not right and that's not accurate. I think about my understanding of China at 10 years compared to my understanding of China at 20 years. And it's vastly different. But especially because of what happened to my career in the last 3-4 years with again, the article and working in the media and doing these documentaries, I feel like I finally did the deep dive. I finally did the deep dive to where now I know it much more deeply to a degree that I couldn't even explain to someone else. And so now when I hear other people talk, I just kind of go,
I get it.
and
I
keep quiet. I keep quiet.
There's no point in arguing. But I think hopefully our show can show a lot of people, maybe who haven't been to China, that it's a fun place. Look at all the great things that Mr. Ma has done, right, over the past 24 years.
We are actually running out of time.
Yeah. Well, let me advertise
Mr. Ma, I was
a little.
hoping we could convince you here on the air while we still have you that we can have you back in a couple months again.
Yeah, so,
It might be my pleasure. It's a long conversation. We have to do part 2.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much for your
much.
time.
It's been so much fun. Thank you, Mr. Ma. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.